Well, thank you for that, Jessa. It was incredibly beautiful. And thank you to the Tongva and Ahashiman nations of this watershed. I just want to reiterate that we strongly encourage all of you to engage your Native nations that are within your region, whether they're federally recognized or not, as early on in any project or planning process as possible. Um, and it's not only the tribes with land holdings within your region or area, it's also those tribes whose traditional territory is in the land that we now occupy. There's state and federal regulations that require tribal consultation, but we call on you to go a step further beyond these minimum standards and just be a good neighbor. We'll provide links in the follow-up resources and on the workshop website that will help you find more information about the traditional territories where you live and work. So now on to our workshop content. For those of you who have not participated in previous workshops, LGC has been working with SAPA for several years now within the Disadvantaged Community Involvement Program funded by Proposition 1. We've been conducting several of these trainings throughout the watershed in person as well as online. And now we're very excited to share with you this expedited mini-series to help even more local leaders become certified watershed ambassadors. Our goal is that local elected officials and other decision makers will complete all 3 sessions to maximize your learning and opportunities for future collaboration. However, we do recognize that your time is in very high demand, and so we've designed each of the sessions to provide a standalone benefit if you're not able to participate in all 3. The certification recognizes that you are an informed leader, that you're committed to healthy and resilient communities, and that you're dedicated to as a public representative of the watershed. So whether you participate in 1, 2, or all 3 of these virtual workshops, you will complete and submit an activity workshop sheet at the end and request your certification. SAPA will send you your certificate as a watershed steward, champion, or ambassador, depending on how many sessions you complete. The 3 topics of our Watershed Ambassador Training Program are 1, getting to know your watershed, 2, collaborative planning in the face of uncertainty, and 3, communicating the value of water. If you missed workshop 1, either in person last year or virtually last month, you can go back and watch the recordings on our website, lgc.org/SAPA. If you miss a portion of this workshop, workshop 2, you can go back and watch the recording later. Workshop 3 was recorded during our live session last fall and will also be available on our website. After participating in each workshop or viewing the recording, as I mentioned, you'll complete the associated worksheet and submit that for credit towards your certification. And again, for more information, visit lgc.org/SAPA. Real quickly, I want to go over the agenda for today. This workshop comprises 5 mini sessions and the activity workshop that you'll complete at the end to solidify your learning from each of those 5 mini sessions. If you have to step away, again, please come back and watch the recording later if you missed anything. We have 3 objectives that we hope you will achieve by the end of today. And we like to share those with you up front so that you can evaluate how well we did on meeting those objectives. After participating in the workshop, we hope that you have a better understanding of the key principles of water and land use integration, that you can identify the major agencies or departments or plans involved in water and land use, and that you're able to determine best practices for ensuring coordination in your own local planning processes. We'll be going over all of these things today. In order for you to plan effectively so that your communities are resilient, whatever the future conditions may be, we must break down the barriers between these different sectors, agencies, and departments, especially between water and land use. This graphic represents the 3 spheres of influence or potential integration points for water and land use planning. Planning documents, projects that implement those plans, and the people who manage both the plans and the projects. The overlap between these 3 spheres is the opportunity for collaboration. Our communities across California and within the Santa Ana watershed are facing interrelated and cyclical issues. We refer to this as the drought, fire, flood cycle. This is a natural cycle that has always been just a fact of life for Californians, but now each phase of the cycle is becoming more and more severe. Recent history demonstrates that the compounding impacts that climate change has had on our natural drought, fire, flood cycle is just going to continue to get even worse, with more intense droughts leading to more frequent and extreme fires. What happens in our headwaters doesn't necessarily stay in the headwaters. Only months after those more extreme fires, devastating floods rampage through the burned area and wreak havoc on communities downstream. And yet we continue to develop in these fire and flood prone areas. I'm sure you've heard that cooperation is often born of adversity and need. We are certainly in a time of adversity and need. The 5 major wildfires in the past 2 years have destroyed nearly 21,000 homes across 6 counties. That's equivalent to more than 85% of the new housing units built in those counties over the past decade. California is at a critical inflection point. As a state, we understand the strain that rising housing costs has put on our communities, economics, and our livelihoods. There's political pressure to build and build quickly to alleviate both the housing crisis and the economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. But where and how we build will be equally, if not even more important than how many new housing units we put in. If we don't do a better job planning where and how we develop, these challenges will only worsen. We must leverage our limited funding and political will to work collaboratively to develop more resilient communities. COVID underscores the interconnectivity of our socio-ecological systems. Public health, economics, resource management, all of these things are interconnected. All of the water that we have on Earth is all that we'll ever have. I used to tell my elementary school students that we drink dinosaur pee. There's only a finite amount of water on the planet, and we're never going to have more or less. Like any finite resource, we must use this wisely. Whatever decisions we make about water or land use will inherently impact each other. When we develop, we're making long-term water management decisions, whether we acknowledge it or not. Land use impacts our water supply and our community resilience. For example, if you develop in a flood zone or a fire-prone area, we must acknowledge the long-term costs and implications that these inevitable natural disasters will have on our communities and our economies. Not to mention the additional water needed to put out those fires, and the floodwaters will have to attenuate when those floods come. Likewise, water agencies must acknowledge that when they commit supplying water to any user, they're ultimately responsible for meeting the long-term land use demand. Water districts, though, cannot ensure a long-term water supply without an understanding of projected land use in the future. Drought contingency planning, for example, must consider projected population growth. A wise woman once taught me that whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. We've heard from many water agencies over the years that they don't want to be involved in, quote, social engineering or land use planning. But I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with SB 221 and SB 610, the Show Me the Water legislation. It's been on the books for over a decade now. Our current laws only require land use planning agencies to ask the water agency if they can and will provide the necessary water for new development. The water agency is in the business of selling water, so it's advantageous for them to say, tell me what you need, and we'll find a way to get you the water. But if water agencies commit to delivering water now without thinking through the long-term implications, they're inherently saying no to other future projects that they won't otherwise be available to provide water to. What we've built, our physical infrastructure, is being unmade by the passage of time. In the 50s and 60s, we thought we could engineer our way out of every problem. By 2021, we now know that that's false. and yet we still tend to plan the same way. Now is the time to respond. Now is the time to change our mindset. The challenges we face today exacerbate one another. Population growth leads to increasing competition for all resources, including water and housing. Sprawl development increases the cost of water, which has implications on long-term supply reliability. And this may also ultimately impact water affordability for other industries, including agriculture. Building in areas that are prone to fires and floods creates numerous long-term stresses on our financial resources and our community viability. Longer, more intense droughts decrease the overall health of our watersheds and causes immense stress to the green infrastructure and river systems that we all rely on. You see the compounding impacts? I know this is a lot of doom and gloom, but we need to stop the domino effect. We must begin to explore the linkages between these compounding challenges and reach beyond our own departments, beyond our city councils, to consider how our decisions and plans impact the broader planning of the region and the landscape of the watershed. You all are the key decision makers influencing change on these issues. It will take your creativity and a system thinking approach to make integration a possibility. We need to recognize the interrelated nature of our collective work and strive to address our challenges holistically. Talk to your water providers, coordinate with Public Works and the Utilities Department, engage elected officials who are making these key decisions, some of whom are yourselves. This will take time, but it is time very well invested. Now, I'd like to transfer things over to my colleague, Emily Finnegan, who will walk you through in more detail who you should be coordinating with.